Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Game of Thrones Winter's Coming. The last episode we talked about Daeron and how he works with his awakening skill, and in that same case we talked about on-hit formation setup with Synara as a general motor for that specific formation. And in an earlier video some weeks ago we talked about the spear weakness healing setup. So we've basically covered two of the major formation systems that are in the game, and today we're going to take a look at the third one, which is revolving around the female active skill damage setup, and we're going to go through a few commanders with their awakening skills to get an idea about how it functions and what you can do with them. So let's jump right into it. So let's take the general output or look at how the damage output is increased and how the active skill damage formation works. To understand that, we also have to look at active skill damage and what it is. And each commander, as you can see, has some passive buffs, either economic or war related, which benefit your troops or your castle or aspects of the game that you want to pretty much increase. And then they have an active skill damage, which is the top one you can see here. Deals damage equivalent to 110% of the troops attack to the enemy, cooldown 15 seconds. And once you upgrade them to a higher tier in terms of awakening, you can see that the damage increases and the cooldown is reduced as well by 2 seconds and so on. So you have a set amount of active skills that are happening in the battle from the commanders, which damage the opponent based on the amount of troops you have. So now you might think, okay, that's fine, that's great, but how does that affect the female skill damage setup and the female skill damage in general? You see, with Layla as the main drive, motor, initiator, whichever you want to call it, once you have her awakening skill unlocked, then the system starts to function and starts to work. Layla's awakening skill is something in the lines of when your female commanders use the active skills, that skill will have a 30% chance of being used 2 times, a 10% chance of being used 3 times, and a 3% chance of being used 4 times. So it's basically some RNG based lock system, if you can call it like that, and even with her weapon on top of that, you will get an increase to some of the chances of things happening. But it's nothing super major. I believe it just increases the... I think it increases the double proc chance to 40% instead, and then maybe some small amount of percentages to the others. And she is very useful in that sense. But you're setting up your army around the fact that you want to do skill damage rather than army damage. So your army stats are going to be split, and you will need certain female commanders to actually get the full value out of it. And one of those commanders is, of course, Arya. And the reason to why you want to use Arya is because when she gets awakened, she has this particular active skill. When she uses her active skill to attack the enemy lineup, a death marker will be added to the target lineup. For every 1 death marker on the target lineup, Arya's stark skill damage to that target increases by 20%. So if you're lucky, you can get a triple proc active skill, then you'll have a 60% damage increase already, and then once the proc again, then we increase further. So you do very fast scaling damage from active skill damage with Arya, while Layla is active as well, and that way you can kind of get the most damage possible out of it. And then there are of course also certain dragon skill damages and so on that can actually help amplify the skill damage output and dragon skill follow-up and so on. But Layla and Arya are basically the 2 main factors in that sense. Having taken a look at 2 of the more main drives behind the female skill setup, you can actually branch out in different directions depending on whatever troop types or whatever direction you generally feel like suits your account. Most people use the Selma Awakening as well, because at the start of the battle, allied female commanders have an 80% chance to use the active army skill one time directly, but the normal attacks of troops the allied female commander belongs to will have a 30% chance of missing the enemies in the first 5 seconds. And this particular thing, of course, also activates Layla's Awakening, so you have the possibility to start out the gate with an increased damage from Arya, which starts ranking up as well that way. So in that sense, her Awakening skill suits into the system. You can also use what's it called, Marjorie's, because this is also active army skill based. After casting the active army skill, there's a 50% chance to inflict the disarm status on one lineup of a random enemy male commander. The duration is equivalent to the number of enemy commanders in battle times 2 seconds, and disarmed means that the enemy can't use normal attacks, which is really good against the on-hit setup, which we mentioned in the last video. So there's some kind of countering involved between all these 3 troop types. And if you want to go for a more troop-specific female setup, maybe, then you can use Haley, because when her Awakening skill is unlocked, then whenever Haley uses an active skill, ally infantry have 40% chance to obtain a shield that grants immunity to damage one time. The shield lasts for 3 seconds, and of course, since it activates several times, then there's a bigger chance for the shield to actually activate, which is really great. But it only affects infantry, so you would have to find an infantry lineup. And some other very important female commander you can use in this particular setup is Annie, because when casting an active army skill directly wipe out 3% of the target's currently deployed troops, and value cannot exceed 3% of Annie's currently deployed troops. So you have plenty of options to use in terms of active army skill damage female commander setup. You just have to look at the female commanders that are available and use their skills. Even something like Andrea you can still use, even though her Awakening skill doesn't have anything to do with active army skill damage, then Layla will still activate her normal active army skill damage, so you still do damage, you just don't get any active army bonuses through the Awakening, since her Awakening is static. As you can see, it's based on the proportion of infantry and spearmen compared to the enemy, so that way you still get value out of it, you just get a different type of value, a more flat bonus in that regard. So check through some of the female commanders and figure out what might suit for your needs. I personally really like the Arya, Annie, Selma, Layla and Marjorie setup, because it of course does a lot of damage and disruption, and you can basically use anything you want, pretty much. Before finishing the video, there's obviously something that I have to mention, and a side note to when you're using active army skill damage from female commander setup. There are, I believe, 2 exceptions where you can't use them once they have been awakened. One of them is Sinara, because when she uses it, she pretty much denies, I believe, your entire setup. She silences all active army skills, so you don't get any value out of it. They kind of work against each other, Layla and Sinara Awakening, so don't use Sinara. You will lose out on all your active army skill, because Sinara only works on hit, which is a shame, but that's how they have designed the game. And the other person to keep an eye on is Rhea, because she, similar to Sinara, also has on-hit effects, but she also gets silenced. So you have to look when you look through the commanders that are getting silenced by the Awakening skill, those can't be included to the female skill set lineup, of course. And obviously male commanders can't be used to the female skill setup either, because they are male, so they don't get the benefits from the Layla Awakening. Something I would highly recommend if you have the money for it is probably Daenerys and Cersei's. Both of them are super strong active skills that apply to pretty much any troop type you want to run, so they're super flexible in that sense. It just costs a lot. And then there's obviously the future CAF commander, which will probably be released in a couple of months ahead of time, which will, if it follows the trend like the two other commanders that we had released, Daron and Dina, then she will be suitable for the female skill set lineup. But that's kind of what I had today. I hope you like the video. Like and comment if you want to. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And of course, if you want to play the game, the link is down in the description below, as well as this for the Discord group for Game of Thrones when it's coming. And you can also see the music, or where I get my music from, in the description below as well. So I hope you all have a great weekend and take care. Good luck with AC and have fun. Bye bye.